This week, I'm taking you on a treasure hunt around Paris. But first, we need to start with a Paris word association game. When I say river, I bet you think Seine. And that is fair enough because it is one of the most iconic parts of the Paris landscape. But did you know that there was once another river? In fact, for most of Paris's history, there was another river running through this city. I'm talking about La Bievre River that ran from the southeast corner of the city and emptied into the Seine, a much smaller river but very important in the history of the city. That is until 1912 when the last of it was buried over and built upon. The Bievre was forgotten. However, if you know where to look, there are medallions, there are street signs, there are markers, and there are indications of how the city was built based on where this river once flowed. And guess what? They're thinking to bring it back. In this episode, I'm going to show you how to find the Bievre River of Paris. I'm actually going to walk through a part of the river, and I'm going to talk about the future of it, how maybe one day you will be able to see it too. And at one point, I'm going to get particularly nerdy, and I'm going to take you deep underground to where two of my Paris fascinations collide. This is the Eiffel Tower. My name is Oliver Gee, and B is for Bievre. That was the music of our maestro, Pres Maxson. I'll talk about the song again in a second, but first I want to introduce today's co-host. It is a pilgrim of the Bievre, Lina Nordin Gee. Hello, Lina.
Hello, I like my new title.
Is it fair to call you, to switch you from Parisian postcards to Parisian pilgrim of the Bievre?
Yeah, I wonder if that account is already taken.
Well, we'll fix that if it's not already.
Yeah.
The reason I'm calling you a pilgrim is because you joined the walk from across as far as this Bievre ran through Paris, and I think you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it.
I did.
Good.
Yeah, I felt like, Indiana Jane.
And it had a similar vibe, especially with these medallions to the last. It's a treasure hunt,
isn't it?
Exactly. It's a scavenger hunt through Paris. So before we get into anything that we're going to talk about, I want to paint a picture for everyone. If you never heard about this river, I think it's important to say where it is first and the size of it, because otherwise you might be imagining something massive like the Seine. Let's visualize this for you, right? Imagine you got a big white dinner plate in front of you, big round circle. That is Paris, okay? Take a paintbrush, draw a blue line right across the middle. More or less, that's the Seine, okay? Now take that paintbrush, go right to the middle, skip along to the right just a little bit, and do a kind of wavy line down to what would be 4 or 5 o'clock on the clock. Can you picture this?
Yeah. Okay,
so that is the Bievre River. And in terms of the size, it's a lot smaller than the Seine. I mean, like it's almost at a size that you could jump from one end to the other.
So it didn't
As in one side to the other.
I see. It didn't even touch the right bank.
No, it flowed into the Seine, and some people say that it still does. We're going to get into a lot of this
The geographics.
Exactly.
I see.
And because it really is a lost river, and a lot of people, experts, don't agree on some parts of it.
Yeah.
So I think what we'll do first is we'll talk about this pilgrimage that we did, but I'll start by giving a proper shout out to Pres Maxson. That song that you heard and that you're going to hear more of, he says, "This is my take on a nice little duet recorded by French-Canadian singers Dan Bievre and Isabelle Boulay. I like its tone, wistful and wanting, like a search for something long lost. It's off the album Duos de la Tendresse, and the tune is called Rivière Perdue, or for non-French speakers, Lost River."
Oh, wow.
He's done it again, hasn't he?
He's a gem.
He's a maestro.
Yes, that's amazing.
So I think we should rewind a little bit to talk about sort of the impact of this river, right? The important facts, you need to know it's at least 1,000 years old, maybe many thousands of years old. Small little river that made its way to the Seine and was covered over entirely by Paris authorities in the 1910s, 11s, 12s, somewhere around there.
And the city just grew on top of it.
Yes,
It's
much
amazing.
like with the Philippe Auguste
Yeah.
Wall. And I had this idea for years that I wanted to trace the whole thing through the 13th arrondissement into the 5th and to the Seine River. And it was one of those things that just never happened. Until I had the idea, if I made an invitation and invited people, then I had no excuse not to do it.
And it's easier that way because, I mean, it's kind of hard to find these little medallions and there's no proper map.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things where there's maps of where it used to run.
Yeah.
It's been built over again once
It's
again.
hard.
And even besides the medallions, I knew that there was more to find.
Yeah.
The more, and you know, do you remember the funny? Like we have to rewind because this is months and months ago.
Yeah.
And do you remember I printed off all those maps? We were in our old house. I printed off all these maps and put them over each other, trying to figure out the best route. Because when I put an invite out to the Patreon members, said that we were going to follow this lost river. Lots of people said they were interested, and I was like, this would be terrible if I just rock up and say, well, let's go northwards. And then a big shout out to Paris K, who went and tried the route out for us before we did it and gave us some pointers. So as with all good Paris stories, this one begins in the 13th arrondissement.
Said no one ever.
Did 13th rank lowest out of all the districts when we went to the mall?
I think it's down there.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
who
nothing
knows?
personal.
No, who knows?
It's nice.
But it started at the Parc Kellerman, where neither of us had ever been before, and we said to the Patreon members, we'll meet you at the water fountain there. Knowing full well that we'd never been there before, and having no idea how many, if any, people would show up. So we get to this park, and we start looking for the water fountain, and we found like a big pond, and we're just waiting there. Time ticks on. Past the meeting time, no one shows up. We're like, is there another water fountain or is no one coming? And then we just were like, oh, there's 2 levels to this park.
Yeah, we decided to ask some people working there, and they were like, nah, we have seen no one.
Yeah,
You are on your own.
Yeah, the park wards like threw us off. They're like, no, you're in the right place. And then for some reason, we went up a staircase, turned a corner, and there was this big group down there. And I was like, oh, there must be some walking tour going on or something. And then as we started walking towards them, as I remember it, they started cheering.
Oh, yeah.
But
yeah.
it could have been...
And balloons and
have been-
doves
No,
flew into the sky.
As I think about it, it might have been them going like, oh, they're here because we were late. But it turned out that there was 15, 20 people all ready to do this walk on this cold winter day. And it was a really touching beginning. So with that... I looked through the pictures of everything. I realized I was holding my microphone. I'd forgotten about this. So I'm going to play a little bit of the intro of what I told them so everyone knows the journey we're about to go on. So the idea today is we're going to walk from where the Bievre River entered Paris. It still does. It enters underground. It's kind of forgotten. It's lost. And we're going to walk all the way, not to where it empties into the Seine, because that bit's, I think, is kind of boring. We're going to follow towards... where it ran through the Philippe Auguste Wall. We're going to go underground, hopefully, if everything works out. And along the way, we're going to find traces and hints of where this river sort of went through Paris. And what I mean by that, is, firstly, the medallions on the ground, the plaques, the signs, there's shops that might be named after the river. Anything that says Bievre, we're looking for. We're going to split into groups sometimes and sort of scavenger hunt this thing. And then... also in like the shape, like the architecture, any old buildings, curved buildings that look like they flowed along a sort of river. We're looking for all that kind of stuff. And whenever you find it, you got to yell out with excitement and we'll all run over and take pictures. And the idea will be we'll retrace the steps of this river that flowed for like I think thousands of years, but was only covered up 100 years ago. And then at the end, maybe have a cold drink in the restaurant that's called La Bievre. Does that sound like a good idea? Wow. Okay, well, let's go. So then we began the walk. When you leave that park, there's not much in the park itself, though incidentally, that park is where they're going to hopefully open it up again, maybe first. So that could be really cool in the future.
Oh, awesome.
But like it spits you out of that park and you get onto like a very typical boring road, ugly. but there are so many medallions.
Yeah.
As we're walking in this group, like we walk past like 3 or 4 straight away.
Yeah, people kept shouting. They were like, there's one over here. So we spread out, right, on like separate sides of the road and everything, just to be able to cover as much ground as possible. And you just kept hearing people like, here's one. And, you know, we missed several.
Everybody kept missing them. Yeah, and it was cool because at the beginning we were taking lots of pictures of them. Unlike the Arago medallions from the previous episode, these ones don't seem to have been stolen anywhere near as much.
No.
And so these medallions that say Bievre, and then they say on them either bras mort or bras lit.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, and that was because there was several channels of the river. So when it split into 2, we all split into 2 groups, and the fun sort of began. We're gonna have to kind of sum up the walk because it was an hours long. Yeah, it was an hours long walk. But the part that I found really cool was seeing, like I mentioned, the architecture of the city, or like the curve of a street.
Yeah, it's cool because you could see clues of where the river once were, I guess. Yeah, just, you know, the streets around it, and exactly how you said, how the buildings, they just built around it. It's
and there's little clues as well. Like there's a metro station, a street called Glacière, which is like glacial, like where the river used to freeze over.
Yeah.
I think there was a shop or a daycare center called the Bievre Daycare Center. And all the while we were heading towards Rue Bievre, which had nothing to do with the river, but it felt like a nice place to stop. And to the one special treat at the end, which we'll talk about in a second. But there were 2 bits that I think I want to point out. One that's kind of, because when you walk around, because the river's been covered up for over 100 years, it's not it's weird because it's not a very visually arresting part of Paris. So it's not like with the Arago medallions, you're going through Luxembourg Gardens, Palais Royal, the
it's
Louvre.
like the top 10.
It felt like on this walk,
this is definitely more residential. You know, there are no big, you know, amazing tourist attractions anywhere near, really.
No, pretty much. You go alongside the Butokai, which is a really lovely neighborhood.
Very nice.
And funnily enough, we were in a restaurant when we last went to the 13th called the Tanneur de la Butte.
Another clue.
Yes, the tanners of the Butte Chaumont.
Yeah.
Because these guys would have worked down there.
A lot of textile industries around this little river.
So, I mean, yeah, that ties in really nicely to this next bit. One of the most visually stunning places is this old tower that used to back right onto the river. So there's paintings of this from over 100 years ago with the river running alongside.
Yeah, and today you wouldn't understand where it is. It looks like an old chateau in Normandy or something with a little moat around it almost, you know? You wouldn't be like, oh, that's definitely Paris.
And I think it was tied to the back of the Gobelin factory. So the guys that made, the Gobelin family that made tapestries.
Yeah.
Which leads into why this river was covered over. These guys who were making the tapestries, these guys who were tanning leather, were using the water for to clean things, to let dye run out, and it was putrid. It was disgusting. So I realize as we're saying this, it might be quite hard for people to imagine just what it was like. Even for you, Lina. I don't know how well your imagination stretches. So what I've done is I've carefully produced the sound of the Bievre as I think it would have been 500 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Do you want to hear?
Yes, definitely.
Ça tue!
How many people were involved in this production?
That was me doing voices of peasants.
Oh my God. You sound like Life of Brian.
There was also our son Otis. So you know what though?
Yuck.
The sound of the river though, that was the sound of the Bievre. We'll get back to that again. I want to play it again just as the river flowing. Here's the sound of the Bievre River.
It sounds like someone walking in it.
Interesting.
Maybe.
You say that. We're going to get back to that later, but the river is still running. We're going to get to that. So back to the walk. another thing I want to point out, and I want to give a shout out to the members as well, because we recorded a large part of this walk. What was really fun about it was how everyone got into the treasure hunt aspect of it. And I rewatched a lot of the 1 hour of it that I filmed. And when we it's kind of funny when people thought they saw something, they were yelling out and running for it. Some of the people, Ali, I think, disappeared. She got so excited.
Oh yeah, she was like, "It's all right. I'm just gonna check over here,and like disappeared like
She
several
went for
blocks
like an hour
away. Yeah, she just broke off.
And then there's times that, because I'd prepped this quite a lot, but there were times when I found things that I wasn't expecting, and I got really excited about it too. And in this, I'll just play a little clip from the Patreon video that we did that members can rewatch, or any new members can go and check out. And this is a bit where we found, because it wasn't just medallions. This also differs from the Arago markers. They had big bronze plaques that they
like plates.
Yeah, like the size of a hand towel in a kitchen, right? And they'd put them surrounded by bricks into the pavements, the sidewalks. I thought that was a really nice touch, especially saying there was a windmill here or a water mill or whatever. And we were walking along and we found one of them that I wasn't expecting on Boulevard Arago.
Oh,
unbelievably.
I mean, chills, really.
Have a listen.
And see, where'd the river go then? So straight down this street and then through these buildings. Where? Any signs? Let's have a look around for signs, and then we either go left or right. Found something!
Found something. It's about this building.
This we haven't seen before. This is a new one. So it says, the river passed between number 12 and 14 of this boulevard here. And that's cool.
And look
okay.
at the door on
So this is what we talked, and this is what we talked about at the start, the way that the river influenced the architecture. So you see, this is a lot what I did with the Philippe Auguste wall. If you guys have been around for a while, you can see that the way the city can be built around other structures. So in this case, the river would have gone right where I think Carl is standing up there. So we can have a look. Okay, so this would have been river right here. So now it's just a courtyard. And if you look carefully, there's these weird wooden sort of structures on the top of these buildings up here that I think are related to the tanning, maybe where they hung the leather hides that are still up there, because I can't think of what other purpose they'd serve up there. But a cool little snippet here. Look, this would have been a river once. These buildings probably haven't changed much, especially those. That's a special building.
Oh, I love this. I mean, this is proper treasure hunt. Isn't it amazing how just things get lost, and even things that you see every day and you don't know what they're for?
Especially if those, like when those markers aren't there and you just see like an unusual shaped courtyard or two buildings that don't quite match, there's often some kind of story behind it.
Yeah.
Especially knowing, like in other cities, like in Lyon, where there's this big mix of medieval and newer and whatever. Whereas in Paris, so much of it got torn down by housemen. So that when you've got these, like...
these old little clues.
Yeah, the clues, the treasure is there to be found. So another thing that I mentioned in that little snippet was the Philippe Auguste wall. I think I have to do a quick explanation for anyone listening who doesn't know what we're talking about. I'm Oliver Gee, and I'm guilty of being obsessed with an old Paris wall. I'll say it, I don't care.
But it's not just any old wall.
This is a wall that's 800 years old and got swallowed up by Paris, and I made it one of my missions to find all the vestiges. But there was one vestige that I never found. And the reason is it's way underground, and you can only get into it like by appointment on the first Tuesday of every month.
Not on a full moon.
On a full moon, if you bribe the post office man at the top, because there's a post office on top. And as it happens, by very rare foresight on my part, I organized this walk so that it would pass that post office at 2 p.m. on the first or third Tuesday of the month.
Perfectly on time.
And that's where we headed after that little snippet. So from that part, Boulevard Arago, there's one more cool bit that you pass, which is the bottom of Rue Monge. Now, this is a place where, if you're listening to this and you think, I'm not going to do the walk, this is the best place to do it easily, is you go to Rue Monge, which is one of the top
It's
three,
beautiful
top 5.
in itself.
Yeah, it's a market street. You should walk that street no matter what you do.
You should have lunch, you should go shopping,
Yep.
just enjoy.
At least an hour on that street. But if you go all the way to the bottom of the hill, on the south side, there's like a selection of little water fountains, and do a big loop around that fountain. I mean, even like one street over, and you'll find there's like 5 or 6 of these big plaques on the ground saying that there were water mills there, and lots of the little medallions. In fact, there's medallions there saying that it was a bras unique, because it was a special arm that went off, like a unique arm of the river once went there.
Much like Ali, who just ran off by herself
She
to
was a bit
find
of a unique pilgrim, wasn't she? Big shout out to Ali.
Yeah.
Now, the trajectory of this river was diverted in 1148 by some monks. I'm reading this to get exactly right. They wanted water at the Abbey of Saint Victor. Now, this is where all the fascinations join, because for them to get the water from this, in the 5th arrondissement, to their abbey, they had to get the water through the Philippe Auguste wall. How do you get water through a wall? The mystery thickens. How did they get the water through a wall? Well, let me tell you, Lina, they built an archway, a big, glorious archway that was forgotten for centuries. As Paris kept growing higher and higher, like the ground level just kept going higher, they forgot that there was this big archway. They just lost it until they were doing some renovation works below a post office.
And it was kept intact.
It was perfectly intact, and they discovered it in recent decades. And I guess because it was buried for so long, it was perfectly intact. So what happened, this walk that we were on with 15 Patreon members, we went down below this post office on Rue Cardinal Lemoine until this guide, who only spoke French and was doing it for like 20 other French, typically older people, he opened some door, and behold, there was this big, beautiful arch where the Bievre River once flowed through the Philippe Auguste wall. It was my holy grail moment.
It is pretty incredible. I mean, worlds collide.
Some of the Patreon members were taking pictures of me. I think they thought that I'd start glowing or something when I was down there. But it was pretty special. It was actually really special. And especially that it's difficult to get down there, like really difficult. You got to, all the stars have to align, like you said. Now, I'll be honest here. The guy that does the tour does it in French, and if you don't speak French, there's no way you want to be down there for an hour.
No.
So I suggest you do what we did, even though it was quite rude, and we said, I'm so sorry. We have to leave. We took some pictures and we left, and I'd warned him that we might do that, and I don't think he was exactly thrilled about it. But
he'd never seen such a big audience, though.
It's true. But we went up there, and then from there, you have 2 choices. You can continue back to where the water supposedly empties into the Seine, near the Gare de l'Austerlitz, or you can do as we did, found a restaurant on Rue de Bievre, and here's a little bit of audio from the end of our walk when we all had a beer in front of us. Okay, so everybody, I've just found out we did 13,000 steps, starting in the 13th arrondissement, and there's 13 of us sitting here. What does that mean? It means unlucky for some, but not for us, because we did it. We walked the whole of the Bievre, and now we're sitting fittingly in a restaurant that used to be called La Bievre, apparently, on Rue de Bievre. And we did it. So I just wanted to say to everybody sitting in this room with me, and everyone listening at home, but especially everyone here, thanks for joining me, and cheers.
Cheers! Cheers! Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci.
A lot of 13s there.
Yes.
Where also, I think it said we were 16 at the start. What happened to the other 3 people?
They got lost. That's, you know,
They're
that's
still down in the
way.
post office.
That's the way of a treasure hunt.
So I know that I would have dragged you to some extent along on this adventure, and I'm curious, what did you honestly think about it?
Well, I actually thought, like, all in all, amazing. It's really cool. It's an old, forgotten part of history, and you know, to kind of discover it it's great to see that part of Paris, which you never really would have seen otherwise. But I would also say that it's not, if you're like a first time or even second time in Paris, I would not recommend to go tracing this old river unless you're a proper enthusiast.
Ali.
Ali.
I'll add to
Or
that.
yourself.
I thought it was fun in the treasure hunt aspect and trying to find the medallions and the story. I love the story. I love that kind of stuff. But I think a typical visitor to Paris, I think what I would recommend that you do is you get to the bottom of Rue Monge and you spend 15 minutes.
I think that's perfect.
Yeah, do that bit.
Do a little bite-sized chunk, and
it's still a treasure hunt.
Get a little taste for it, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Go see the medallions.
It's just like what I said in the Palais Royal is the best place to find the Arago markers. Same thing here. Go down there with whoever you're with. Say, I know what this is about. We won't do the whole walk today, but let me tell you. So there you go. It's definitely worth a look. Find at least one medallion. But if you're a super fan of the river, then you can take it a step further. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
I'm talking about the Comte de Saint Germain. Regular listeners to this podcast will know the Comte de Saint Germain because firstly, he's one of the most active commenters on the social media. He is a longtime fan of the show and a supporter, and he was also the guy that took me down into the illegal part of the catacombs, and he got a reputation. I saw people commenting when I shared a picture of him recently to say that we're up to some hijinks again. People saying, is this the guy?
He's famous,
the guy?
Infamous.
And so he messaged me and he said, look, I know you're doing something about the Bievre. I would like to, as an immortal of Paris, more on this in a second, I would like to show you a very special part of the Bievre River, but it's going to take half a day and bring your thigh-high boots from the catacombs. Now,
it's not often in life that you hear those words.
This is his name, the Comte de Saint Germain. This is how you must refer to him, right? He met me in full get-up, full garb, full costume. And Lina, I want you to describe it because you're looking at a picture of him.
Right.
But I want to pay particular attention. He was holding a cane. And when I met him, we also met at Parc Kellerman and started heading south, so out of Paris. He opened up the cane, because this was soon after I'd been doing all those cane episodes, pulled out some whiskey, and we all had a shot of whiskey before we started our adventure. Now, for the listeners at home, can you explain...
A true gentleman.
Can you explain what he's wearing?
All right. So what we're looking at here is a very well-dressed gentleman, and he is wearing a full flannel grey suit, red silk cravat with a matching breast pocket handkerchief, and he's got his muddy thigh-high boots on top of all this, and a very impressive top hat, extra height on that, I think, and we also got some steampunk sort of glasses.
And he's got three-piece suit, he's got the waistcoat, he's got gloves, cane in his right hand, and I must say a big smile on his face.
A huge one. He's a happy one.
So this is what happened when the Comte took me to the suburb of Gentilly to show me where the Bievre has been opened up to the public once more.
Who are you?
I am the Comte de Saint Germain.
And for people who haven't listened to you and me in the catacombs, can you just explain for us again why you're wearing the mask and the hat?
Oh, that's because I'm an immortal. And when you're immortal, people want to know why you're immortal. They want to steal your secret. They want to experiment on you. So it's better if I, keep a low profile. My face hasn't changed for 2,000 years. So I try to be discreet. I work mostly with voice. That's why I take people with my voice through audio guides through Paris so that they can just hear me without seeing me. I think it's safer when I'm not seen.
So people don't actually know your real name and your identity, or you don't have a real name and identity?
I have one regularly. I have to change because it starts to look suspicious, for the police, the tax office, and so on. So every now and then I change my civil identity and I try to live a very normal life, but I'm who I am. So
What did you make your mask out of?
This is a mix. It's a mix of many things. It's leather and weird gears. Allows me to look at the past.
And do you notice that people are looking at you as we walk through these suburban streets?
Oh yeah, it happens. Sometimes people think I'm a magician. If I'm carrying gear, sometimes I was called Jules Verne. Some people see me as Baron Samedi. I don't mind.
Okay. And you're my expert on the catacombs. What are we doing now? Why are we wearing these boots?
Well, first of all, one is sustainability. You've purchased these boots to go in the catacombs. I don't think they should be used only once, right? I think we need to
I use them in Pigalle sometimes on a Friday night.
Well, there you go. Sexy times. So now it's a bit less sexy. It's a Sunday afternoon, you know. But A, I want you to reuse those boots. And B, you've tracked the Bievre in Paris. Now, I'm all about being real. And now I want you to be in the real Bievre, in the actual water, not above it. Inside it.
So people I think it's really important I say, because this is audio, if you're thinking, because we're standing next to the water right now, I can see it over your shoulder. If people are thinking this is anything like the Seine River, they're going to be sorely mistaken here.
Yes. So I walked in the Seine at the last flood. So I used the fact that, you know, the Seine was overflowing, that you could actually walk inside the Seine, you know, sort of over the knee. Now, we're going to do this in a much safer way because it's maximum 2 meters wide and about 20 centimeters deep.
Well, you don't know that yet.
I've done my research.
Okay.
Like, the Bievre was never that deep, but this particular part has been done in a very nice way. But we have our boots that are, you know, over the knees, so we should be safe
These
enough.
boots didn't help in the catacombs for me, remember? When we went through
you had a slight accident, yes, towards the exit point. So
that's right.
Here we're entering. So
okay, shall we walk in?
Yeah, let's try that.
Okay, so we're walking down a grassy slope. There's no one around. It might be illegal what we're doing again.
It might, you know, so let's be careful. So I brought my cane, which helped me in the Seine to not fall in the Seine. Okay, so I'm touching the ground here. Careful, it's a bit slippery.
Okay, this cane, which incidentally opened to reveal a whiskey flask.
Yeah, it was some liquid courage for today's adventure.
Okay, you're in the Bievre. Okay, I can jump in, I think.
Okay, yeah, just need a hand. Careful about the algae. So everything here has been rebuilt and planted. The water has been cleaned, sort of. Not drinkable, do not drink the Bievre. But there's no more tanners, there's no more, you know, like washing machine people or any of that. So
we're standing in the middle of an ancient river, Comte.
We are.
Can you feel the thousands of years of history?
I can feel the energy, man. And look at that. So this is now, over there, the grill, the Bievre becomes a sewer again. So everything under Paris is underground, basically in a sewer. And this is the very first spot outside of Paris where the Bievre is free again.
And are we going to walk against the current?
Against the current.
And and this suburb,
upstream.
Where are we exactly?
We're in Gentilly.
Gentilly, okay.
Gentilly, which is one of those suburbs that got amputated by Paris when they made the 13th arrondissement.
Right.
You know, so there's still some Gentilly left, and we're in it.
Okay.
And we're walking towards like Arcueil, which is the next suburbs. And what I'm going to do right now is take a bit of the Bievre.
Yes.
In my flask.
In the flask that had whiskey before.
Yes, because this cane was baptized in the Seine. So it's carrying the Seine outside. Now I want the Bievre to be carried inside.
Wow.
It's going to be a little ritual that will need to be done a bit later to reunite the Bievre with the Seine.
What do you mean you're gonna pour this into the Seine later?
Well, of course, because the trick is right now the Bievre does not pour in the Seine, and I think this should be remedied, right?
Wow.
We need to reunite the rivers, so I will take this, and one day it will be poured back in the Seine.
I love it. I think there might be a hole in my shoe.
Is it?
Okay, so should we start walking up the river?
Yeah, let's start walking.
All right, here we go.
So now I think it's my turn to ask, how was that experience?
That was cool. After doing all the trekking around above the river, it was cool to literally get in and see what
you didn't need to imagine anymore.
No, and it was like, I can see how it would work in Paris if they had it. Like, it doesn't like a river; it's like a canal. But the stream was quite. You could hear us wading through it. The water was quite quick, and it was pretty. Like, they'd made this little park with a little footbridge over the top, and it continued for like 600 meters or something like that, and into Arcueil, which is another neighborhood up there.
Right.
And it was interesting, they've done the same thing further along in the river, and the idea, like I said, is to do the same thing in Paris at some point. Just really cool. Also cool to get out of, one thing we didn't talk about, the walk from Park Kellerman to that little part of the water. You could see traces of the Bievre way more clearly.
Really?
Like way more
like
clearly.
Like what?
Like, because some of the buildings were disused, like the old tanneries were still there and disused. And it looked like, in those movies like Grease and Terminator 2, I think, where there's those big, in America, I don't even know where it is in America, but like huge concrete valleys where they drive cars.
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Imagine that on a way smaller scale, but just abandoned, but way smaller scale, only big enough to push a shopping trolley along.
But there was water?
Concrete.
In there?
No, like an empty one. Just like in those movies, the cars.
Yeah.
So you could walk along them and you could see how they could easily.
Okay.
But the thing is, these things cost so much money. It's such an effort, and
it's not a priority.
And the suburbs, some of those parts were a little run down anyway. So how are they gonna make that a priority?
Yeah.
Anyway, this leads us to the future of the Bievre in Paris.
Is there a future?
Apparently. So the future of the Bievre, there's been talks for decades about reopening this river. People really want this to happen. There's communities, there are people who do art shows. You can do a midnight run along the track of where the Bievre ran. But there was an article in the Time newspaper fairly recently about how to battle climate change they might work on bringing this river back. The idea being when there's water flowing through a city, it can help with managing the climate, right? So the deputy mayor for climate, water and energy in Paris, his name is Dan Lert, so Lert maybe. And I'm not a big fan of this guy. That's unprofessional to say, but this story's been bubbling around for months for me, and I've messaged him on every channel to say, just give me 2 minutes of your time. Never responded. I could see that he saw my messages, though.
Really?
So, I'm not going to give him too much time. But look, here's what he said to Time magazine. We have to adapt Paris to the future. He said we have to adapt Paris to the future, and yet this is one of the most densely populated cities in the world. On top of that, it's a historic city with lots of heritage restrictions, so we're limited in what we can do. La Bievre is one of the great tools that we have for climate helping. So
what does this mean?
It means it's an excuse. These things will take forever. He said it will take
He's basically saying, it would be nice, but...
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing I think would be really cool if they opened it around Kellerman, that park, and around where that tower was.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of water. The best thing that could happen, and this is the sort of positive note to finish on, in other cities where they've brought back old streams and rivers, in Auckland and especially in Singapore they did it, they saw there was a big uptick in visitors to the area. And what I think is the best thing that could happen for the 13th arrondissement that gets a bad rap, for just being a little far away and not much to do, would be if they had some kind of little attraction that people could go, not even tourists, even locals, to spend some time and to check out the fascinating history of
I think
Paris.
that sounds lovely.
So on that note...
It has my vote.
It has your vote.
I'd say
I don't know if Dan has my vote, but the idea certainly has my vote. This could be something that you guys will all see on your next trip to Paris, especially if your next trip's a little way down the line. But thanks for listening to this episode of the Eiffel Tower. B is for Bievre. Thanks to Comte de Saint Germain. Thanks to you, Lina. And thanks to the Patreon members. Now, if you want to join as a Patreon member as well, you can watch the replay of that walk. I'll make sure it's at the top of the page. Patreon.com/the Eiffel Tower. Next week, the letter C. I'm going to every week drop clues. Not just in the podcast. There was a clue in this podcast episode.
Yes, there was.
But on social media and everything, so you can try and figure it out. But it's a good episode coming up next week and the week after, and I think the week after that. Try and guess along. Otherwise, do me a huge favor and tell your friends about this show. My name's Oliver G.
My name is Lina Nordin Gee.
Pres Maxson is our musician who's going to take us out. Eddie G editing the show. And the Patreon members are making it all happen. Merci beaucoup and au revoir.
Bye-bye.
And long may the Bievre flow.